There is a silent day in every human life, a moment with no fireworks, no background music, no slap in the face or punch in the gut. But it hurts like it had all of those. This day doesn't come with a warning. It doesn't knock. It slips in slowly, like an emotional poison you only notice once your body starts to fail. It's the day you realize, deep within a gesture, deep within a silence, that someone never truly loved you. They were just using you. Maybe for your effort, maybe for your attention, maybe because it was convenient. But it wasn't love, it was use. And the worst part isn't that. The worst part is realizing that you allowed it, not because you wanted to, but because you didn't know how to say no without guilt, because you confused kindness with debt, because you thought pleasing was loving, because someone long ago taught you that saying yes was beautiful, and you believed it. But in that moment, frozen, remembering all the times you gave in, you feel a chill inside, a discomfort with no name. The first defeat isn't when someone beats you, it's when you realize that you betrayed yourself out of fear of being rejected, and no one prepared you for this, because talking about manipulation hurts. It hurts more than talking about physical violence, because manipulation is polite, it's sweet. It comes in the shape of care, of compliments, of friendship. That's why it gets through. That's why it pierces your armor. That's why you allow it. The day you realize you were manipulated is not a day of war. It's a day of mourning, because you bury an illusion, the idea that being good is enough to be loved. But Musashi didn't believe that. He never carried that illusion. He knew being too good is the open door to being controlled by those who don't respect you. That's why he chose a different path. A path where no one could use him anymore, because he gave nothing he didn't want to give. No gesture, no reply, no attention, no soul. There's a kind of human being that cannot be manipulated. Not because they are strong, but because they are empty. An emptiness that doesn't beg for attention, that doesn't need an audience, that doesn't live waiting for messages, responses, affection, crumbs. This kind of person has a rare power. They don't need anything, not the other, not the explanation, not approval. They live from the inside out. They are a well, not a bucket. Musashi was that kind of man. He didn't write letters to apologize, didn't beg for affection, didn't explain his absences, didn't justify his choices, because a warrior who wants to be invincible must first cut out the need to be loved. That's the secret. You're only free when you're able to be alone and not die inside. Most people don't have that power. They live with inner holes they try to fill with attention, company, validation. They can't stand being misunderstood. They need to respond, to explain, to prove they're good. And because of that, they're easy to control. All it takes is saying, "I'm hurt by you. I thought you were different. I didn't expect this from you." Boom, the trap is set. Guilt kicks in. Fear of losing freezes them. They're already back in the emotional cage, but Musashi refused those chains. He had a war philosophy. If something external affects you, it's because you're vulnerable on the inside, and that is unacceptable. To be free, a warrior must cut every string someone might pull to control him, and that only happens when you understand. The less you need, the less you suffer. You think no one controls you. But try doing what you really want. Try saying no to someone who always expects your yes. Try disappearing for a few days, or saying you prefer to be alone, or ignoring a demand that comes wrapped in affection. The world will lose its mind, because manipulation doesn't scream. It tries and whispers. It traps you through expectation, through repetition, through guilt. It makes you adapt slowly, without noticing. Until one day you wake up and realize you're living a life made of concessions and calling it love. You no longer decide on your own. Everything is filtered through an invisible lens. What will they think? Will I hurt someone? What if they think I'm selfish? But you weren't born to live like this. Musashi knew that. He was raised in a Japan where honor came before affection and silence before explanation, and that's why he was dangerous, because no one could control him, because he knew how to say no and be silent and disappear. In your life, the ones who manipulate you probably don't even realize it, but they feel it. They feel they have power over you, that one look can change your behavior, that a subtle guilt trip can make you bend, that one silence can disarm you. That's not love, that's domination. And the truth is, as long as you need someone's affection to function, you'll never be free. Musashi understood that freedom doesn't start with a sword. It starts with a choice. Choosing to cut the fear of disappointing. Choosing to cut the need to be understood. Choosing to cut the urge to justify. Freedom is not a flag. It's an absence. The absence of everything someone else could use to control you. Musashi didn't start as a sage or as a hero. He started like everyone else, the son of a harsh father, trained through pain, forged in absence. But it was precisely that absence of affection, of comfort, of applause that became his first shield. Because before he ever learned to cut with a sword, Musashi learned how to stand alone. Alone in childhood, alone on the road, alone in war, alone in life. And it was that solitude that made him invincible. Because the world might threaten you with abandonment, but it cannot destroy someone who already knows how to live without needing anyone. That's the first lesson, the hardest, the most painful, but also the most protective. Because as long as you fear being alone, you are controllable, you are bribable, you are a prisoner of ties that look like love, but are actually handcuffs wrapped in perfume. Musashi understood that solitude is not the absence of people, it's the absence of emotional dependence. It's looking at the world without hunger for approval, without thirst for applause, without craving touch. When he retreated to the Rigando cave at the end of his life, he wasn't running away. He was making the final gesture of freedom, cutting even his name, his fame, his own story. And why does that matter to you? Because you are surrounded by neediness, by emotional blackmail, by dependence on how others see you. And if you don't learn how to be alone, how to enjoy your own company, how to live without filling your emptiness with outside voices, you will be used constantly by everyone. Because the world knows how to sniff out the needy, a lonely soul in despair, a heart that's too available. Musashi's solitude wasn't sadness. It was clarity. It was focus. It was control. When no one affects you, you can act with precision. When no one holds you down, you can cut with lightness. When no one matters more than your peace, you become untouchable. Musashi didn't need to be understood. He didn't need to please. He didn't need to explain why he cut ties. He lived in the silence of someone who expects nothing and is therefore capable of anything. Until you reach that peace of being alone, you are a hostage. And manipulators will always find an opening. In your fear of being rejected, your desire to be accepted, your hunger to be loved. Cut that, or you will be cut by it. The most dangerous prison doesn't have bars. It has bonds, feelings, promises, and above all, silences. Human beings aren't chained by iron hands, but by invisible threads of emotional attachment. That's how the game begins. You care. You get involved. You start making small concessions. You give in here, agree there. And without realizing it, you no longer know what is truly your desire and what is just someone else's reflection inside you. This is the modern cage, emotional slavery. You're free in the body, but a prisoner in the heart. And what looks like love, care, empathy is often just a subtle system of emotional manipulation, where you become predictable, moldable, controllable. The world doesn't force you. It just creates a setting where you force yourself to give in, out of fear of loss, of disappointment, of being alone. Musashi, in his brutal clarity, broke that early on. He understood that poorly digested affection is a trap, that expectation is a chain, that guilt is a leash. He trained not only the body but the soul to be entirely his own. That's why no one possessed him, no one dragged him, no one controlled him, because he owed nothing to anyone. He didn't swear loyalty to weakening ties. He didn't feed bonds built on obligation, and right there lies his strength. While the world plays with emotional chains, Musashi lived as someone who had already broken free from all of them. And what he teaches us is brutal. If you want to be free, you must kill the idea within that you need to keep everyone close. Attachment is a comfortable prison. It lulls you with memories, with affection, with promises of forever. But deep down, it blinds you. It limits your steps. It makes you mold yourself to expectations that were never yours. And the cruelest part is that many of those chains were placed by your own hands, out of fear of loss, desire to please, need to not be abandoned. But every manipulator knows this. They know exactly where you refuse to cut. They know where guilt still lives. They know the words that disarm you. And that's why, as long as you love without awareness, you will remain a hostage. Musashi shattered those illusions with his sword. Not the metal one, but the philosophical one, the blade of inner clarity, the one that separates what you are from what others expect you to be. And maybe now it's your turn to wield that blade too, not to hurt, but to set yourself free. The most dangerous poison of manipulation doesn't come from hatred. It comes from what looks like kindness, from the compliment that demands something back, from the help that expects a return. From the affection that comes with a bill. That is the most dangerous enemy, expectation disguised as kindness. That's what traps you, that's what shapes you, that's what makes you smile when you want to disappear, what makes you give in when every part of you is screaming no. The emotional manipulator doesn't show up as a villain. He shows up as a victim, as a friend, as someone who only wants the best for you. And that's why you don't see the rope tightening. You think you owe them something, that you're being ungrateful, that you're being selfish if you say enough. And that's how the prison is built, with invisible threads, with gestures that seem harmless, but are deeply rooted in hidden control. Musashi didn't play that game. He understood that forced kindness is just another form of obedience, that being too nice is offering yourself up defenseless. That's why he cut early, cut cold, cut without ceremony. He didn't accept bonds that came wrapped in disguised demands. He didn't smile out of obligation. He didn't return affection he didn't feel. And that made him dangerous, because he was unpredictable, untamable. He didn't react to the emotional scripts others tried to impose on him. He was free because he owed nothing, because he never faked reciprocity, because he didn't betray himself to keep others comfortable. And this is the most brutal point. The true warrior would rather be seen as cold than be controlled by emotional blackmail. You need to understand this. Every time someone says, "But I was only trying to help," and uses that as leverage, it's not love, it's a contract. And emotional contracts don't set you free, they bind you. Every "I did so much for you," spoken with a tone of guilt, is a trap, because it turns care into currency. And you are not currency. You are not here to pay for the good you received. True kindness doesn't demand change, doesn't expect a return, doesn't impose behavior. Real goodness releases, it never traps. Musashi saw that with blade-like clarity. He knew that expectation is the most fertile soil for manipulation, and that's why he cut it at the root, before it became a tie, before it became a debt, before it became a prison. If you feel you owe too much, if you're always trying to repay everything, if you're carrying an emotional backpack full of obligations to be good, it's time to stop, to look in the mirror, to realize you're being controlled, not by commands, but by heavy smiles, by favors that press, by kindness wrapped in behavioral guidelines. And if you don't cut it now, you'll lose yourself, you'll fade, you'll disappear. The only way to defeat this subtle enemy is with the invisible sword of clarity. The one that separates genuine affection from toxic emotional bonds. The one that says, "Thank you for your help, but I don't owe you my freedom." The human being is born pure, but doesn't survive pure. From an early age, we learn to smile to avoid punishment, to please in order to be loved, to say yes to avoid loss, and little by little we begin to shrink, to shape ourselves, to move further away from who we really are, until one day we wake up as strangers in the mirror, not knowing who we've become, because we spent so much time trying to be accepted, praised, included, that we became a character, an emotional puppet, a slave to the reactions of others. That's what we call the social ego, this adaptable mask, smiling, kind, well-behaved, that lives to avoid disappointing anyone, even if, to do that, it disappoints itself every single day. Musashi killed that ego early, because he understood that pleasing others is a form of imprisonment, a golden chain, a perfumed leash. You smile, but you're shackled. You help, but you're exhausted. You say yes, but inside you're falling apart. And no one sees, because the world applauds those who dim themselves to keep everyone else's light shining. Musashi never dimmed. He was whole until the end, and because of that he was misunderstood, feared, because he didn't play nice, didn't pretend, didn't edit himself, didn't shrink to fit in anyone's emotional pocket, and that is what made him invincible. He was authentic even in silence, brutal even in affection, free even in his gaze, because he didn't ask permission to exist. He didn't try to prove he was good. He didn't beg to be loved. Musashi knew that the need to please is the weakness of those who want to be strong. And if you still need someone to validate you, then you are manipulable, because that will be used against you. You'll be bent with compliments, shaped with disappointment, controlled with a look. And you'll think you're being good, but in truth you'll just be betraying yourself under the label of empathy. The social ego is an invisible trap. It turns you into the world's emotional employee, always helpful, always polite, always smiling, always tired. And the price you pay is steep. You vanish. You become a friendly blur, a useful presence, but without a soul, without truth, without the courage to say, "I don't want this anymore." The death of the social ego is a rite of passage. It's the moment you accept you'll lose people, you'll disappoint, you'll be misunderstood, you'll be called cold, arrogant, ungrateful, but it won't matter, because freedom is worth more, because peace weighs more, because your essence can no longer be held hostage by the expectations of others. Musashi didn't expect to be understood. He didn't fight for affection. He simply followed the path he knew was his, even if that path left him alone, even if it made him hated, even if it caused him to be remembered as someone difficult. Because the truth is this: those who live to please will never be remembered. They will pass like shadows, be used as emotional spare tires, and in the end, be thrown away. But those who live to be free may die alone, but they die standing, with their sword in hand and their soul intact. 60 men, 60 real warriors, 60 duels where a single mistake, just one, meant death. Miyamoto Musashi didn't win in a controlled ring. He wasn't a martial arts champion with rules and referees. He faced 60 swordsmen in life-or-death duels, with no protection, no armor, no audience. Many of them had status, tradition, schools, academies, and disciples. Musashi had nothing, except his sword, his mind, and his absolute disdain for everything vain. But what few truly understand is that Musashi's real fight was never against others. It was against himself. Each of those 60 men was a metaphor, a symbol, a manifestation of ego he had to destroy within. The proud warrior, the elegant manipulator, the fame seeker, the one who demands respect, the one who takes offense easily. Musashi killed each one, and with them killed a part of himself that could be corrupted. And what about you? How many of those men live inside you? How many versions of yourself still get offended easily? How many parts still crave recognition, applause, validation? How many times have you felt defeated simply because someone ignored you, rejected you, replaced you? That's right, your war is silent, but it's as real as Musashi's duels. And it happens every day, when you choose to remain silent instead of exploding, when you walk away without explaining, when you stop comparing yourself, when you refuse to play emotional games disguised as love. These are your duels, your 60 men. And they won't disappear with gentle meditation. They won't fall to motivational quotes. They need to be defeated with a sword, with cuts, with brutality. Musashi trained until he bled. He fasted, slept little, walked alone, not to punish himself, but to forge himself, to shield himself against everything that makes a human being weak and domesticated. And that strength was not arrogance, it was silence. He could kill, but he could also spare. He could vanish. He could ignore an insult without reacting, because true power is not in striking back. It's in not needing to prove anything. It's in being unaffected. It's in resisting the vanity of being recognized as strong. And that's where many fail. They defeat the external enemy, but remain slaves to themselves. Musashi didn't. He kept cutting until only emptiness remained. Until nothing could control him anymore. Not fear, not pride, not desire, not guilt. So think, who are your 60? They have names, situations, frustrations, people who still destabilize you, wounds that still govern your decisions, inflamed ego still demanding a response, emotional addictions you confuse with love. You must face them one by one, as Musashi did, not with a blade of steel, but with choices, with silence, with the courage to no longer be who the world expects. Because only then do you become invincible, not by killing others, but by killing within yourself everything that can be manipulated. Musashi could kill with a sword, but he could also kill with a glance, with silence, with absence, with clarity. Because in a world addicted to illusion, truth is a blade sharper than any steel. Truth doesn't strike with rage, it strips with coldness. It tears off the masks of manipulators, the disguises of those who fake love, the shields of those who control through guilt. And that's why most people prefer to lie or to live in lies than to face truth for what it really is. Raw, dry, irrefutable. Truth doesn't shout, but it silences, and its silence is unbearable for those who live for appearances, because it doesn't offer comfort, doesn't offer excuses, doesn't pat you on the back. It only says, "You're betraying yourself," and then it goes quiet. Musashi knew this. That's why he wore no armor, no speeches, no drama. He was truth in human form. Every gesture was a consequence of internal clarity. He didn't fight out of rage. He fought out of necessity. He didn't withdraw out of fear. He withdrew because he had nothing to prove. That's the strength of truth. It doesn't ask for space. It simply takes it. And that's why it terrifies. Because most relationships, promises, and words around us are fragile. They're based on games, on expectations, on unspoken emotional contracts, and when someone shows up carrying too much truth, they disturb, they confront, they threaten, because they break the emotional script everyone memorized to feel in control. For Musashi, truth was the sharpest sword, not because it cut others, but because it cut himself. He didn't allow himself to live in illusion for convenience. He didn't accept ties that required him to be less than he was. He didn't fake, didn't sugarcoat, and that's why he couldn't be manipulated. How do you control someone who prefers to be hated than to be fake? How do you bend a man who would rather lose everything than betray himself? How do you trap a warrior who has already embraced the pain of solitude? As long as he stays whole, Musashi knew those who live in truth are terrifying because they are untouchable. They don't need to seduce, don't need to convince, don't need to manipulate. They simply exist with such clarity the world trembles. And maybe that's why you're still a hostage, because you can't face the truth about who you are, what you want, what you feel, what you no longer wish to tolerate. Because saying, "This hurts me," takes courage. Saying, "I don't want this anymore," requires rupture. Saying, "This isn't love," demands maturity. Truth doesn't scare because it's cruel. It scares because it demands action. It demands you cut what no longer serves. It demands you stop selling yourself for acceptance. It demands you face the mirror and say, "I've betrayed myself for too long, but no more." And that's where the real duel begins. Not against someone else, but against the character you built to be accepted. That one, that mask, must die. The world admires warriors, but it doesn't understand how they are born. It believes they're made of talent, of physical strength, of genetic courage. But true warriors, like Musashi, are forged in silence, far from applause, far from teachers, far from safety. It is in the void that the warrior is formed. And Musashi understood that early on. His training wasn't spectacular. It was lonely, brutal, invisible. He didn't train to win duels. He trained to depend on nothing. Not perfect weapons, not memorized techniques, not praise, rewards, or validation. His real training was about killing dependence. Because the man who needs is already defeated before the fight begins. Musashi practiced with sticks. He faced warriors armed with real swords, using pieces of wood. It wasn't madness. It was intention. It was method. He wanted to prove to himself that nothing external made him strong, that his strength came from within, from brutal clarity, from a disciplined body, from a clear mind, and most of all, from a spirit unafraid of loss. He didn't wear armor because he didn't fear the cut. He didn't speak too much because he didn't fear being misunderstood. He simply was, completely, without excess, without ornaments, without crutches. Because the true training of a warrior is not physical, it's psychological, it's emotional, it's spiritual. It's the ability to live whole, even when everything around you is collapsing. And that's the part most people don't want to face. Because it hurts, because it's lonely, because it demands sacrifice. You say you want to be strong, but still need likes, replies, affection. You say you want freedom, but still kneel emotionally to those who offer love in exchange for obedience. You say you want to win, but still beg for approval. Musashi isolated himself so he wouldn't depend. He fasted so he wouldn't be a slave to food. Slept on stones so he wouldn't be attached to comfort. Trained with sticks so he wouldn't be seduced by the perfection of the blade. Because he knew those who need perfect conditions don't survive chaos, and the real world is chaos. Musashi's silent training was a vow: I need nothing. And because of that, nothing could control him. Nothing defeated him from within. He had already lost everything that made him fragile: vanity, pride, impatience, the hunger to be admired. And what remains of a man like that is invincible, because he doesn't fear loneliness, doesn't fear loss, doesn't fear being misunderstood. He fears only one thing: betraying himself. And that's why Musashi trained every single day, not to impress, but to stay whole. And if you want to be free like him, you'll have to start training too. Train silence, train denial, train resistance, train the decision to keep going even when no one claps. Because the strength that doesn't depend is the only one that cannot be manipulated. Presence is a valuable currency, and the manipulator knows it. He doesn't just want to control your words. He wants to control where you are, how much you give, how much energy you deliver, because your presence, when given too freely, becomes a thread, a bond, a tether. And through that tether, you'll be pulled, charged, tied and drained. Musashi understood early on that being too physically present is the first step toward losing your center. He practiced absence as strategy. He would vanish without explanation, cut ties without drama. He knew that often the warrior wins, not with the strength of his sword, but with the silence of his departure, because those who are not there cannot be used. Those who don't respond cannot be manipulated. Those who don't explain cannot be steered by guilt. This is an invisible tactic, but a devastating one. The emotional manipulator needs your reaction, needs you to defend yourself, to cry, to explain, to try to fix things, because as long as you respond, you're still playing the game. But the warrior who disappears breaks the game. He collapses the board. He frustrates the expectation. He interrupts the flow of control. And that disarms any manipulative structure, because absence is a bloodless cut, an ending without a fight, a scream that doesn't need to be shouted. It's the famous, "I'm not playing this game anymore, and I won't even tell you I'm leaving." And that's exactly why it's so powerful, because it doesn't give the other person a chance to emotionally defend themselves. Musashi didn't run away. He withdrew, and that withdrawal wasn't cowardice. It was strategy. He stepped back to avoid contamination, to avoid reacting with ego, to avoid wasting energy on unnecessary battles. And more than that, he knew that by disappearing, he created more impact than if he stayed, explaining, pleasing, trying to convince. He was the kind of presence that, when absent, revealed the other's dependence. Because when you disappear, the world shows you who stayed out of love, and who was there just because they could use you. Absence reveals everything. But this tactic requires preparation. It demands emotional maturity. It requires that you withstand the discomfort of not replying, of being misunderstood, of seeming cold. Musashi endured that with ease, because he didn't need to be understood. His compass wasn't the judgment of others, it was his own clarity. And what about you? Can you bear to disappear? Can you resist explaining yourself? Can you stand being unavailable? Because only when you can be absent without guilt will you realize how underestimated your presence truly was. Absence is the final move of someone who's understood that being free doesn't mean always being present. It means knowing when to disappear and never return. There's a type of presence that attracts attacks, and another that reflects them. The first is the target, someone who, by simply existing, provokes demands, comparisons, pressure, and surveillance. The second is the mirror, someone who doesn't absorb anything, only returns it. And Musashi was that mirror. When he remained silent before provocation, the other saw themselves. When he didn't react to hatred, the other was confronted. When he refused to engage in emotional games, the other unraveled, because those who refuse to play the manipulation game expose it, break it, strip it. And that's why so many feared him, because he didn't return emotion. He returned clarity. He didn't fight out of pride. He fought for truth. He wasn't there to convince. He was there to cut through falsehood. And this is one of the greatest keys to personal power. Stop being an emotional target and become a spiritual mirror. The target suffers, reacts, begs, explains, blames itself. The mirror simply observes, simply returns, simply shows, through the absence of reaction, how much the other is trying to control you. Musashi knew that real control doesn't happen through shouting, it happens through others' reactions. That's why he trained neutrality as a weapon. When an enemy expected fury, he delivered serenity. When someone tried to humiliate him, he offered silence. Because he understood that to react is to give power, to reflect is to disarm. Are you a target or a mirror? Because if you're still in the position of begging, explaining, trying to fix everything with words, affection, performance, you are at the mercy. Any manipulation hits you, any cruel remark breaks you, any absence makes you desperate. But the day you become a mirror, the game ends. Because the other will see their own ugliness. They'll see themselves trying to use you. They'll see the drama they create. They'll see the way they manipulate through poisoned affection, and maybe they'll leave, because mirrors terrify those who live in illusion. And that's why most people can't stand the presence of someone who no longer needs anyone. Musashi was like that. He walked among men as if carrying a force field. He wasn't aggressive, but he was untouchable, because he had already eliminated every entry point through which he could be attacked. And you will only earn that kind of shielding when you stop moving with the world and start returning the world to those who bring it. That takes practice, clarity, maturity, and above all, a brutal decision. Never again live to please, prove, or beg. Just exist with solid presence, with unshakable clarity, with eyes that say, what you throw at me goes back to you. There is a kind of cut that doesn't come from anger, doesn't come from revenge, doesn't come from wounded pride. It comes from clarity, from sobriety, from the mature exhaustion of someone who has tried everything and realized that continuing would be self-sabotage. This cut is silent, precise, irreversible, and Musashi mastered it like no one else. He didn't need to scream, accuse, or create a scene. When he chose to cut someone out, he did it without emotion. Not out of coldness, but out of protection, because he understood that hatred is still a bond, still energy, still reaction. And the true warrior only cuts when he is clean inside, because if there is resentment, the other still lives in you. And as long as they live, they still control you. Indifference is an underestimated weapon, because it doesn't look like strength, but it is one of the greatest. It is what keeps you from returning to the same place out of need, what protects you from replying to messages that diminish you, what keeps you silent in the face of provocations designed to unbalance you. Indifference is the emotional state of someone who no longer negotiates with disrespect. It's a weightless armor, invisible, but present in every gesture, in every non-response, in every non-glance. Musashi knew that sometimes the real battle is not to fight. It's letting the other scream alone. It's cutting the tie without making noise. It's simply disconnecting your soul from someone who no longer deserves your presence. And here lies the secret. The manipulator feeds on your reaction, on your outrage, on your effort to be understood. When you explode, he wins. When you argue, he grows stronger. But when you feel nothing anymore, he dies. Dies within you. Dies in your absence. Dies in the space you no longer fill. And that death is final, because you don't need to defeat him with words. You just need to survive him, without needing him anymore. Musashi used this technique masterfully. He cut without getting dirty, without carrying hate, without chewing on grudges. He understood that the real cut is the one that frees you, without destroying the other. Because destroying the other is still a bond, still a war. But freeing yourself is peace. And that peace only comes when you understand. The opposite of love is not hate. It's nothing. It's the clean, calm, final cut that leaves no emotional trace. Just a clear emptiness, a definitive silence. A page turned that never turns back. You need to learn this art. The art of cutting without anger, leaving without noise, ending cycles without drama, letting go without needing to prove you're right. Because in the end, it doesn't matter what the other understands. What matters is what you carry. And if what you carry is still hatred, still attachment, still pain, then you are still a prisoner. But if what you carry is clean indifference, self-respect, and lightness, then you've already won. Miyamoto Musashi spent his life fighting with swords, but he died writing, isolated in a cave with his body failing, with his bones heavy, with his eyes turned inward. He didn't ask for visitors. He didn't write farewells. He left no heirs. What he left was a piece of paper, a short, dry, brutal manuscript called Dokodo, The Way of Walking Alone. 21 lines. None longer than a sentence, none asking for forgiveness, none explaining anything, but among them, one burns, one shines brighter than all. One is, in truth, Musashi's golden rule for never being manipulated again. He wrote it with a weak hand, but a soul fully intact. Do not desire things you do not need. That sentence is the heart of freedom, because those who desire can be bought. Those who desire can be manipulated. Those who desire become servants of what they chase. And the manipulator knows this. He won't use chains. He'll use promises. He won't shout. He'll offer. He'll seduce you with what you believe you need. A compliment, a chance, a love, an approval, a title, a return, a memory, a crumb. And as long as you want it, even secretly so, you'll be controllable. Because someone can offer you exactly what your ego craves. And when that happens, you've already lost. Because now you dance to someone else's tune. But Musashi danced with silence. The golden rule isn't about being cold. It's about being whole. It's about realizing that everything you desire in desperation is the door through which someone will invade you. Musashi knew the true warrior is the one who no longer wants what the world can take. And that's why he was dangerous, because he couldn't be bought, or seduced, or conquered with status, praise, or passion. He had already burned all of that. He had already cut those strings. He had already killed inside himself the hunger to be applauded. He didn't crave fame. He didn't want conditional love. He didn't chase safety. He wanted only one thing: to be free. And for Musashi, freedom began with this radical denial. To not want what is unnecessary, and what is necessary after all: clarity, discipline, calm, honor, silence. The path itself, everything else, is distraction, is noise, is a trap. And you need to understand this now. As long as you desire what weakens you, you will be manipulated. But when you cut off all superfluous desire, when you're content with little, when you no longer need spectacle, applause, or noisy affection, then, and only then, no one will be able to move you. You will have become untouchable. That is the rule that closes the circle, that seals the code, that frees the spirit. A line that's dry, harsh, minimalist. But if lived, it turns your body into a fortress and your soul into stone, because to desire nothing is to have power. They say to feel is to live. That emotion is proof of humanity, that crying is beautiful, that to love is a virtue, that suffering is noble. But Musashi didn't believe that. He saw no value in excess, no beauty in emotional chaos, no glory in prolonged suffering. For him, feeling was useful until it made you weak. Beyond that, it became a prison, an attachment, a weakness, an illusion. That's why he trained not only his body but his heart. He trained himself not to feel what he couldn't control. And when that is achieved, a rare state emerges, an impenetrable calm, a kind of emptiness that isn't the absence of life, but the presence of freedom. And in that emptiness, the invincible warrior is born. Because what binds you isn't external chains. It's what you feel too much, want too much, suffer too much. You love so deeply that you give yourself away without defense. You feel so strongly that you react to every touch. You expect so much that you're constantly disappointed. And each one of those reactions is a way to be controlled. Someone can manipulate you because they know how you feel, because they know what you need to hear, because they know exactly where you still bleed. Musashi didn't bleed anymore. He had cauterized the feelings that serve the ego. He knew that love, when pure, doesn't cling, that fear, when faced, loses form, that anger, when unfed, dies of hunger. And so, he was empty, but never weak. Musashi's emptiness wasn't coldness. It was mastery. It was internal space free of emotional hooks. It was the ability to be without being corrupted by feeling. And that state isn't natural. It's built, day by day, cut by cut, silence by silence. It's when you stop reacting to everything, Stop being shaken by everything. Stop begging for a reply, and start living from a place of solid clarity. You still feel, but you don't unravel. You still love, but you don't fall into desperation. You still suffer, but you don't collapse, because that you are no longer your emotion. You are the space where it passes, without becoming a home. The modern world doesn't understand this. It confuses intensity with truth, drama with depth, excess with authenticity. And because of that, many live exhausted, drained, addicted to feeling too much, suffering too much, reacting too much. Musashi would look at all this and say, no, because he knew the true warrior is the one who doesn't feel what weakens him and doesn't allow anyone to feel for him if it comes wrapped in chains. Emptiness is an advantage, because where there is no craving, there is no bargaining. Where there is no desperation, there is no blackmail. Where there is no expectation, there is no disappointment. Emptiness doesn't make you less human. It makes you untouchable. It makes you capable of acting with precision, of stepping away with dignity, of loving without submission, of living without selling yourself. And maybe that's the highest state one can reach, to no longer need any feeling to do what is right. Many call it loyalty when it's really fear. Fear of disappointing, fear of breaking ties, fear of seeming ungrateful, fear of leaving the place where affection became a contract. But Musashi looked at that kind of loyalty with contempt. To him, loyalty without freedom is disguised slavery. It's a theater where you play the role of the faithful while bleeding silently inside. How many times have you called love a bond where only you give, where only you hold things up, where only you put the other before yourself? How many times have you kept something out of respect but lost yourself in the process? How many times have you stopped living what you truly needed because of an emotional promise that only drains you? The answer is there, in your tired body, in your tight chest, in your dragged-out days. You're not loyal, you're trapped. And this is the hardest prison to break, because it comes with social approval. Everyone applauds the faithful one, the one who never leaves, the one who takes it all, the one who endures, who erases themselves, who stays, even when they're in ruins inside, even when the other has crossed every line, even when affection has turned to blackmail, even when you're only there because you fear losing the little that's still called love. But Musashi didn't play that game. He believed in a rarer loyalty, the one that begins with the self. He never betrayed his own soul just to keep someone close, because he knew that real loyalty isn't enduring everything. It's cutting what corrupts. You're out here calling virtue what is in truth emotional submission, holding on to relationships that make you sick, upholding promises that no longer make sense, walking beside those who only drain you, all in the name of a love that's become a justification, not a feeling. A love that charges, surveils, punishes, demands a watered-down version of you. And what is that, if not control? The most dangerous manipulator is the one who dresses as affection, who says, I do everything for you while draining your freedom, your spontaneity, your courage to walk away. And you, afraid of seeming disloyal, stay, rooted, planted in soil that no longer nourishes you. Musashi knew there is no honor in maintaining what has already become a prison. He preferred to leave, preferred to lose, preferred to be misunderstood. But he never carried a bond heavier than his soul. He never confused connection with debt. He knew any love that requires you to betray yourself isn't love, it's control with a pretty name. And that's why he was free, because he cut early, cut clean, cut with awareness. He didn't wait for the collapse, didn't wait for the screaming, didn't wait until everything was rotten. He could sense when a bond had become a trap, and he left, without drama, without resentment, without looking back. And now you must ask yourself, with brutal honesty, are you loyal or are you in captivity? Do you still love or are you just afraid to leave? Do you still want to be there or are you just afraid to seem wrong? The answer is yours. But know this, as long as you stay out of fear, out of guilt, out of habit, you are betraying the one person who truly needs your loyalty, yourself. At a certain point in life, Miyamoto Musashi did what few have the courage to do. He disappeared. He didn't flee. He wasn't defeated. He left by choice. He abandoned the world, walked away from titles, left the fights, forgot his disciples, rejected fame, and walked alone into a cave, the Reigando, where he spent his final years in absolute silence, writing, meditating, slowly dying. At first glance, it looks like defeat, like giving up, but it was the opposite. It was the final victory, because in that dry, brutal, definitive gesture, Musashi freed himself from the last thing still holding him, his own image. The warrior who had defeated 60 men was now battling a tougher enemy, his ego. And in that cave, alone, with no audience, he won the most important battle of all. He understood that everything the world can give you, fame, respect, power, admiration, can also be taken away. That any form of external recognition is, at its core, a threat to your freedom, because it binds you, conditions you, forces you to maintain an image, to follow a pattern, to meet expectations. Musashi realized that even the title of invincible was a trap, because now everyone expected something from him. Expected him to keep winning, keep teaching, keep serving an idea, but the true warrior serves no idea. He serves only his path, and for that reason, he cut it all. With the same precision he used to cut down enemies, he now severed the invisible chains, tying a man to the need to be seen. That act speaks louder than 1,000 victories, because most people spend their lives collecting achievements, but remain slaves to them. Slaves to status, to their profession, to their reputation, to performance, even slaves to their past successes. And that's poison, because you can no longer be someone else. You can't change, can't stop, because everything you built now holds you hostage. But Musashi didn't. He destroyed his own biography before it consumed him. He dropped it all, disappeared, went silent, not out of contempt for life, but out of reverence for freedom, because he understood that what truly matters is what no one can take from you. And that's not found in positions or applause. It's in who you are when no one's watching. In that cave, Musashi wrote the Dokudo, and he wrote with aching bones, with skin marked by time, but with a clean spirit, because there he owed nothing, carried no one, faked nothing. It was just him and the truth, just him and the final cut of himself. And in that cut, he conquered what no enemy, no empire, no manipulator could ever steal: absolute autonomy. He didn't need anyone, expected nothing from anyone, wanted to be nothing more than what he was. And that is the ultimate freedom. The kind of freedom that only comes when you abandon everything the world calls success and surrender to the silent clarity of someone who owes no one an explanation. Our image of a manipulator is often a caricature, someone dark, aggressive, obvious. But reality is subtler and far more dangerous. The true manipulator doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't trap you with force. He traps you with guilt. He makes you feel wrong for wanting distance, makes you feel ungrateful for not giving back, makes you think you're the one doing harm just because for once you chose to prioritize yourself. He doesn't threaten. He doesn't demand. He just looks at you in a way that breaks you. He simply says he's disappointed, reminds you of everything he's done for you. And without noticing, you go back, you cave, you reshape yourself, you betray yourself again. Musashi cut these kinds of ties like cutting dry grass, because he knew guilt is the invisible shackle that chains the soul. He trained to owe nothing to anyone, to never feel hostage to a favor. to never be dominated by expectations. He understood that guilt, when it doesn't come from true conscience, is a weapon in the wrong hands. And Deishi, and those who don't learn to recognize that weapon, live trapped in a battlefield where they lose every war without even fighting. Guilt is the emotional Trojan horse. It enters as affection, and by the time you notice, you're already defeated. And here's the truth. The more empathetic you are, the more manipulable you become, because you feel too much. You take too much responsibility. You carry burdens that aren't yours. You bend over backward to avoid hurting others. But in doing so, you hurt yourself. And every manipulator sees that weakness. They don't need to yell. They just show they're hurt. They ignore you. They say, "I didn't expect that from you." And you go back. You apologize. You offer another piece of your soul, not out of love, but out of guilt. And that guilt is fabricated, planted in you so that you never leave. Musashi lived without guilt because he lived with clarity. He wasn't perfect, but he was honest, direct, whole. That's why he walked away without drama, cut ties without weight, disappeared without explanation, because he knew that when someone places guilt on you, it's a power play, and power plays are unacceptable. He carried no emotional debts, owed no favors that cost his freedom, kept no ties that demanded emotional obedience disguised as gratitude, because he had already learned, someone who guilts you doesn't love you. Someone who demands affection doesn't want you. They use you. Ziso. And if you feel guilty for protecting yourself, for pulling away, for putting yourself first, then you're still in someone's hands, in the grip of a memory, a bond, a narrative, and you'll keep living under the subtle threat of being selfish every time you try to be free. Musashi would tell you, cut it. Cut the guilt that's not yours. Cut the emotional debt that was never your responsibility. Cut the affection that comes with a price tag. And above all, cut the fear of being judged. Because only when you free yourself from guilt do you finally choose yourself without apologizing for existing. There is no pain greater than loving alone, giving alone, insisting alone, waking up every day hoping that today the other person will notice your effort, and falling asleep each night with the quiet weight of realizing that nothing has changed. This is the most common and most devastating prison, a relationship where only you care, where only you try. Only you hold it together, only you see what's falling apart. And the cruelest part, even while seeing all this, you can't leave because you still hope, because you still believe, because you still feel guilty for giving up. But Musashi would never live like this. He would never stay where his presence is ignored, where his soul is wasted, where his silence is worth more than his fight. He knew fighting alone is not love. It's self-abandonment. What keeps you stuck in this kind of relationship isn't love. It's addiction. It's attachment. It's the memory of how it started. It's the illusion that with just a little more effort, you'll be enough. But you won't, because a relationship where only one person cares is already broken. It was crooked from the start. It's become a playground for manipulation, and manipulators love this type of bond, where one gives everything and the other just watches, where one exhausts themselves trying to hold it up while the other won't even lift a finger. Musashi would call that dishonor, because it's dishonorable to stay where your soul is traded for crumbs. You want to know how to break free? The answer is brutal. Stop trying. Stop explaining, stop replying, stop giving warnings, stop investing where nothing comes back. What's holding you back isn't the other person. It's your hope, your illusion that things will change, but they won't. Because those who care show up, those who love stay, those who respect you hold space for you, those who value you never make you beg for affection. Love doesn't need daily proof if it's real. But if you're in a relationship where everything depends on you, then that's not love. It's emotional dependency. It's attachment to an idea of us that only exists in your mind. Musashi never asked to be loved. He never begged for attention. He never made a scene when it was time to leave. Because he understood that in staying where your presence means nothing is death by 1,000 cuts. And that's what you're doing, dying slowly, waiting for a gesture, a shift, any proof that you matter. But it never comes. And with each day, the silence gets louder, the wound gets deeper, and the truth becomes clearer. You're only staying because you're afraid to leave, not because it's still worth staying. Cut it. No drama, no rage, no farewell letter. A clean break. A break out of self-respect. And remember, silence is the most powerful response for those who treated your presence as an obligation. Walk away with dignity, and don't look back hoping for regret. Look inward, expecting rebirth. Because no one who's ever had to fight alone deserves to keep fighting for someone who never even entered the war. Liberation begins the moment you realize. True love never makes you question whether you're enough. Musashi wasn't born invincible. He built himself. With discipline, with cuts, with rejections, and with a brutal awareness that the world does not forgive exposed weakness. That's why he developed an internal self-defense system far beyond the sword. The body was the weapon, trained, prepared, functional. But the mind was the shield, an invisible, unbreakable shield, forged not through brute strength, but through the ability to remain untouched by anything non-essential. He knew that any emotional vulnerability, any inner distraction, any subtle attachment could be the crack through which the enemy entered. And for Musashi, the enemy wasn't always someone with a sword. Sometimes it was a glance, a word, a craving, a memory. To survive in a world where combat was literal, where a mistake cost your life, Musashi had to make his body immune to fatigue, and his mind immune to manipulation. He woke early, fasted, trained alone, slept on stone, embraced discomfort as part of the path, because he understood that a comfortable body is a fragile body. But more than that, he fortified his mind. He allowed no distractions, no emotional indulgence, no vanity. He wasn't easily impressed. He didn't get emotional for nothing. He didn't involve himself with anything that threatened his clarity. And that clarity was his fortress, the ability to see everything and react only to what mattered. This is the true self-defense system, a body that needs no luxury, a mind that needs no approval, a spirit that doesn't need affection to remain whole. And you, living in an era where everything hits you, everything affects you, everything pulls at you, everything steals your focus, you need this more than ever. Because while the world distracts you with notifications, cravings, expectations, emotional demands, you are being disarmed, you're becoming vulnerable, and when someone wants to control you, they won't need to scream. They'll just touch the one emotional spot you never trained. Musashi trained every day not to defeat others, but to not be defeated by himself. His breath was a weapon, his silence a shield, his decision a sword. He cut fast, but he thought even faster. Because he knew the warrior who survives is not the one who hits hardest. It's the one who does not get hit by what doesn't matter. And if you still react to everything, still need everything, still feel too much, then you are unshielded. Anyone can break you with a sentence, with a gesture, with silence. And that is unacceptable for someone who wants to be free. Start building this inner system today. Your body can no longer be a temple of laziness. Your mind can no longer be a playground for anxiety. Your spirit can no longer bow to promises, praise, or emotional blackmail. Make your body useful. Make your mind impenetrable. Make your being inviolable. And then, and only then, will you be like Musashi, a warrior who may fall, but will never be controlled. Perhaps the most dangerous phrase ever spoken by a well-meaning human being is this: but I just wanted to help. It sounds noble. It sounds sensitive. It sounds generous. But behind that phrase lies an abyss, the abyss of self-sabotage disguised as empathy. Because most of the time, the one who says this isn't being altruistic, they're being invaded, they're being drained, they're pouring energy, presence, effort and soul into someone who never asked for it. Or worse, into someone who uses that help as a mechanism of control. Musashi would never say that, because he knew helping someone who doesn't want it or who doesn't deserve it is not virtue. It's weakness. It's the trail of an ego that still needs to be needed, that still needs to feel like the good one, that still wants to save the other to prove to itself it has worth. This phrase is born out of guilt, out of fear of appearing selfish, out of addiction to self-sacrifice to preserve emotional ties, out of fear of being seen as someone who abandoned. And that's exactly where the manipulator thrives. They don't force you. They let you believe you're helping, when in reality, you're being used. And when you finally decide to walk away, to cut ties, to leave, they strike low. But I thought you wanted to help me. And that's it. The guilt returns, the phrase resurfaces, and you lose yourself again. Because the truth is, no one changes because of someone else's effort, and no one needs help that comes soaked in resentment. Every time you drown trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved, you drown too. Musashi helped in silence, through presence, through example, but never through emotional servitude. He knew that every gesture born of obligation, of a desire to keep someone, to avoid conflict, to appear good, is at its core a weakness disguised as compassion. And that weakness exposes you, drains you, steals your time, focus, energy. He never insisted where he wasn't called, never stayed where help became debt, never offered what wasn't received with honor, because he had killed within himself the need to be a savior, the desire to be necessary, the longing to be remembered as a good man. He wanted to be free, and for that, he had to stop helping those who only wanted control. So, take a good look at your life. How many times have you stayed in places where you were the one who did the most, the one who gave the most, who solved everything, and kept telling yourself, but I just wanted to help, while inside you were exhausted, crushed, silenced, betrayed? That phrase needs to die now. Because as long as you keep saying it, you'll be captured by anyone who knows how to fake fragility. You'll become prey to every soul that survives by leaning on others, and you'll end up oppressed. But calling it your mission, from this day on, help, only when your gesture doesn't cost you your peace. And only when your soul says yes with clarity, only when it's a clean act, no guilt, no theater, no need for recognition. Help without needing to be seen, without mutilating yourself, without begging for gratitude, because that is the only true help, the one that comes from someone who is the free. There are prisons with walls, with bars, with padlocks, but none is as suffocating as emotional debt. Dear. Not the one written in a contract, but the one that screams silently in your soul every time you try to break free. The debt of someone who did a lot for you, who gave you a chance, who held you up when no one else did, who loves you despite everything. This debt doesn't come with direct demands. It comes with looks, with silence, with memories dropped between the lines. And quietly, it takes root inside you until one day, without realizing, you're living not by choice, but by repayment. You silence yourself to not seem ungrateful. You stay in places that have long died out of fear of being called unfair. You pretend you still love because you feel like you owe. Musashi rejected this with the coldness of a clean cut. He didn't accept bonds based on debt, because he knew that's not a connection. It's a chain. That's not gratitude. It's blackmail. He repaid what he owed through righteous actions, but he never carried the weight of owing his own freedom, Because when someone plants in you the feeling that they saved you, that person doesn't just want recognition. They want power. They want control. They want lifelong access to your soul. And Musashi gave that access to no one. He returned respect, but never submission. Because he knew whoever uses emotional debt as currency will never let you be free. True gratitude doesn't imprison. It liberates. It expresses itself and moves on. It says thank you and walks forward. But emotional debt is a system of manipulation where the good done is used as a lock. And as long as you live trying to repay it, you'll be shaped by it. You'll work where you don't want, love someone who doesn't love you, respond to someone who doesn't respect you. And all for one cruel reason, because someone once made you believe that you only are where you are because of them. And now you live trapped in their narrative. You move with fear. You apologize for existing, and you confuse that with loyalty. But it's captivity. Musashi broke that chain by throwing away the key of guilt, the key of eternal obligation. The key to the idea that gratitude means obedience. He chose to serve only what made sense, what was just, what kept his soul intact. He didn't deny what he had received, but he also didn't kneel for what was already in the past. And here's the brutal lesson. If the good done for you is now used to make you deny yourself, then it wasn't kindness, it was investment. And you became an emotional asset, and the person who helped you now feels entitled to pieces of you that should only ever belong to you. Break away, with clarity, with respect, but with firmness. Say thank you, but walk away. Understand that your life cannot be repaid in guilt installments, that your growth is not a debt, that your story is not a bargaining chip. Gratitude is not servitude, and whoever truly helped you with love will never want to control you with it. Musashi understood this early on, and that's why he died light, with no debts to the world. Because where there's debt, there's control, and where there's control, there is no freedom. There's a kind of pain that doesn't bleed, a wound that doesn't show up on any scan, a grief no one understands, and that you live through alone, in silence. It's the moment when you realize with brutal clarity that you were used, that most of your relationships weren't affection, they were convenience, that what you called love was access, that what you gave with your heart, the other took with cold hands, and more than that, you let them. Not because you were weak, but because you believed. Because you were taught to give, to understand, to forgive, to be the bigger person. But now, something shifts, the truth hits, the weight arrives, and you find yourself facing a question that cuts from the inside out. Now what? How do I move on after a lifetime of giving myself to people who only ever took? Musashi would have an answer, and it wouldn't be sweet, it would be dry, it would be hard, it would be a sword. He would say, accept, cut, walk. Because he understood there's no way to change the past, but there is a way to cut the ties that still bleed in the present. The problem isn't that you were used. The problem is still misusing yourself. It's insisting on wearing pain as identity. It's continuing to live for people who've already shown they only see you as a tool. Pain must be a rite of passage, not a home. It must be a bridge, not a prison. And that's why Musashi cut. He cut ties, memories, expectations, not with anger, but with precision. Because he knew if you don't cut what's already dead, you rot with it. Now it's your turn to sit with yourself and say, yes, I was used. Yes, I was manipulated. Yes, I was emotionally deceived by people who claim to love me. But then you must take the second step, the most important one, and say, this does not define who I am from this point forward. Thus, because as long as you keep clinging to the idea that you were a fool, that you were exploited, that you'll never be more than a supporting character in other people's stories, you're sentencing yourself to the same cycle. The cut isn't about forgetting, it's about no longer carrying. It's about realizing that no matter how much they used you, you now decide what to do with what remains. Musashi never went back to collect. He never asked for emotional justice, never begged for anyone to see his worth, because he knew that's another trap, wanting to be recognized by those who never really looked at you. True rebirth begins when you stop waiting for recognition and start building a new version of yourself without needing the past to validate anything. And that takes courage. Courage to rebuild with open scars. Courage to move on without explanations. Courage to grow without applause. Because yes, the pain of being used is real. But worse than that is continuing to misuse yourself because of it. You will move on, not out of revenge, not out of pride. You will move on out of clarity, out of maturity, out of survival instinct, because what they did to you was cowardice. But what you do to yourself now is choice. And if you choose to keep being useful to those who don't see you, you're betraying yourself. But if you choose to cut, to rise, and to walk, then finally you begin to become your own. Musashi never wasted time trying to be understood. He didn't beg for space. He didn't write justifications. He didn't insist on conversations with those who had already decided not to listen. He simply cut, walked away, went silent, because he had understood with brutal clarity a golden rule. The more you explain, the weaker you become. The more you try to convince, the more you surrender. The more you complain, the more you sabotage yourself. That's why his path was different, a path where freedom wasn't earned through speeches, but through cuts. 3 cuts to be exact, 3 acts more liberating than any word. Don't explain, don't convince, don't complain. The first cut is the refusal to explain, because those who truly love you understand just by looking, and those who want to control you will never understand, even if you speak for hours. In that context, explanation becomes a trap. It becomes exposure. It becomes a desperate attempt to justify choices that are yours, but that now demand validation from someone who doesn't even deserve that privilege. Musashi didn't explain, because over-explaining is disguised permission-seeking. It's like saying, "Can I be who I am?" And the answer, more often than not, is no. So stay silent, cut, walk on. The second cut is the refusal to convince. This one is even trickier, because it's based on the illusion that, with the right words, you'll open the other person's mind, you'll touch their heart, you'll show your side. But someone who lives off manipulation doesn't want to see your side. They just want you to stay on theirs. And every time you try to convince someone who doesn't want to be convinced, you give away another piece of your soul. You bend, you shift, you disconnect from yourself in order to reach someone who's not willing to meet you. Musashi never did that because he knew a warrior doesn't sell himself to fit someone else's logic. The third cut is the refusal to complain, the quietest but the most important, because complaining means living outwardly. It's pointing fingers. It's saying the world owes you something, that others have to change, that life is unfair. And every time you complain, even when you're right, you abandon your center. You give control to what affects you. And Musashi never gave up control. If something bothered him, he cut, he shifted, he acted, but he never asked the world to be different. He was the change. He was the cut. He was the rupture. These 3 gestures, don't explain, don't convince, don't complain, are the 3 cuts of freedom. They form the invisible shield through which no one can dominate you, because you no longer need to justify yourself. You no longer need to be accepted. You no longer need others to understand. You simply are. You simply act. You simply walk. And in that dry, clean, direct movement, true strength is born. The strength of someone who doesn't live to please, to prove, or to defend. The strength of someone who doesn't need to win debates, because They've already won the internal war. The most silent and most cruel battle doesn't happen between you and the world. It happens between you and your desire to be recognized. And that's where most people fall. Because even those who claim to be strong, free, independent still wait. They wait for a look of approval, a word of encouragement, a "you're right," and "I'm proud of you." They wait for others to see, to appreciate, to understand. And by waiting, they get stuck, they weaken, they bend, because now all their strength depends on something no longer in their control: external validation. And Musashi knew, if you need that, you've already lost. Because anyone who needs approval is a slave to whoever grants it. He never asked for permission. He didn't collect fans. He didn't try to be loved. Because he knew, a warrior who depends on others' gaze is fragile, vulnerable, controllable. You think you're living in freedom, but you're tied to an invisible chain, the need to be seen, and the world knows it. Manipulation starts there, with praise, with applause, with smiles, with invitations, and then with silence, with distance, with indifference. And you, addicted to validation, begin to bend. You begin to adapt. You start dancing to the tune someone else plays, all so you don't lose the applause that has become your only source of strength. Musashi refused that, because he understood that true validation doesn't come from outside, it comes from within. It's not loud. It doesn't show up in comments, likes, or feedback. It appears in the silence of someone who knows they acted with clarity, with integrity, with presence. He lived as someone who had already approved of himself and therefore didn't need anyone else. He was stone, rock, void. And that's what made him free, because when no one else can validate or invalidate you, you become untouchable, unreachable, impossible to manipulate. But you still get affected. You still explain yourself, still compare yourself, still measure your worth by the standards of those who never truly saw you. You still ask if you did the right thing based on someone else's reaction. And that's the real prison. Because while your peace depends on what others say or don't say, you'll always be fragile, always subject to influence, always surrendered. Musashi would tell you, cut it. Cut the need for applause. Cut the thirst for approval. Cut the hunger to be understood. Cut everything that makes you depend on the crowd to know if your path is the right one. True validation is invisible. It happens the moment you look at yourself and know you didn't betray who you are. You didn't mold yourself. You didn't go silent out of fear. You didn't act out of vanity, only from clarity, only from truth, only from alignment with what you believe in. And when you reach that point, something shifts forever. You stop walking hoping to be seen and start walking as if you've already won. Because the warrior who needs no approval is the only one who can never be defeated. All warriors in Japan trained with real swords, forged from steel, sharp, symbolic, and perfect. The sword was more than a weapon. It was an extension of the soul, a symbol of pride, of status, of identity. But Musashi? No, he preferred wood. A dry, simple, rough piece of it. An object that in the eyes of others didn't inspire respect. And precisely because of that, it was more dangerous. Behind this choice was a hidden teaching. Musashi trained with wood because he didn't want to become attached. Not to the shine of metal, not to the comfort of perfection, not to the symbol of power. He trained with wood to remind himself that the weapon is never the source of power, only a channel. And if you depend on it too much, you're lost. This was Musashi's true dojo, the school of detachment. He understood that attachment weakens, attachment limits, attachment enslaves. When you get used to the perfect weapon, to ideal conditions, to a favorable environment, you start to depend, and those who depend are controllable. Musashi wanted to be free. He wanted to fight with whatever was at hand. He wanted to win even without having the best. Because the true warrior doesn't lean on tools. His strength lives inside, and for that he trained himself through discomfort, through improvisation, through imperfection, through what's essential. Every time he raised a piece of wood to fight, he was telling the world, "I don't need the best, I only need myself." That's the opposite of what you live today. You want ideal conditions, the perfect environment, recognition before action, certainty before stepping forward. You feel fragile when you're not equipped with the best resources, the perfect setup, the right support. But Musashi knew that life doesn't offer ideal scenarios. Life is chaos, is clash, is noise, is surprise, and those who can only fight with a steel sword die when faced with a dry branch, but those who learn through wood fight with anything, anywhere, in any way, because their strength is not outside, it's within. Musashi's detachment wasn't just from weapons, it was from outcomes, from recognition, from vanity. He trained to not need anything, and because of that, everything worked in his hands. And that's the lesson you must absorb urgently. The less you need, the more dangerous you become. The more you adapt, the freer you are. Because now, no one can take from you what you've already learned to live without. The wood was his master, his metaphor, his daily reminder that nothing external should own you. Not the tool, not the person, not the praise, not even certainty. So look around. See what you still depend on. See what you think you need to have, to be someone, to act, to fight, to exist. And begin today to cut, to reduce, to simplify, to live with less. Because in the end, the true warrior isn't the one who has everything. It's the one who uses what he has and is still unstoppable. Musashi never warned anyone he was leaving. He would simply vanish from battlefields, vanish from social circles, vanish from others' expectations, vanish from the stories people tried to write for him. He disappeared in silence, not as escape, but as tactic, as discipline, as a clean cut through the noise of the world. He understood something few ever do. There are moments when presence weakens you and absence strengthens you. And that's why the act of disappearing became one of his greatest weapons. A ritual of strategic invisibility, where the warrior doesn't retreat out of fatigue, but out of clarity. He knows he must die for a while, so he can return untouched. Musashi's disappearance wasn't just physical, it was energetic, emotional. He emptied himself of outside voices. He stepped off the stage to reclaim his center. He cut off everything that drained his strength, and that included people, obligations, conversations, promises, and frayed emotional ties. Because he knew that constant presence is a risk. It creates dependence in others and drains you. And in a world where everyone wants to be seen at all times, the one who disappears on purpose becomes sacred, unreadable, uncontrollable. Musashi returned when he wanted to, not when asked. He came back solid, sharpened, with expanded clarity, because his power came precisely from not being always available. And that's what you need to understand. Disappearing is not giving up. It's protection, reconstruction, a sign of inner mastery, but you're afraid to vanish and be forgotten, afraid to go quiet and be abandoned, afraid to pause and lose your place. And that's exactly why you're fragile, because you remain present out of neediness, because you believe you must always be there, proving, explaining, attending. But the true warrior knows it is in absence that the soul breathes. It is in silence that the world shows you who missed you and who only got used to using you. Musashi disappeared like someone closing a cycle, like someone who needs no justification, like someone with the courage to walk away without theatrics, because the world respects and fears those who know how to vanish without falling apart inside. And when he returned, he came back with different energy, quieter, sharper, cleaner. Because real disappearance isn't fleeing the world, it's returning to yourself. And no one who comes back from within returns weak. They return invincible, unpredictable, unshapable by what they left behind. You need to practice this. Disappear for a while. From social media, from toxic relationships, from worn-out cycles, from emotional addictions, and above all, from the version of yourself that only knows how to live in always available mode. Cut off, cool down, go silent, vanish. Because those who don't know how to step away will never know how to preserve themselves. And those who don't preserve themselves don't last. Musashi spent his entire life cutting down enemies, cutting ties, cutting desires, cutting everything that made a man weak. But when he felt death approaching, the warrior who never asked for anything wrote. It wasn't a typical will. He left no fortune, no orders, just a letter, a final sheet of paper. A handful of dry, direct, unornamented sentences, 21 of them, all short, all sharp, all bearing the weight of 1,000 duels. This final document was called Dokudo, which means the path of aloneness. And within the last words of a man who defeated 60 swordsmen and survived himself lies the essence of what it means to be untouchable from within. Musashi didn't speak of glory. He didn't celebrate victories. He left no combat instructions. He wrote about detachment, about ego, about freedom. Things only someone who has killed everything inside, except the truth, can teach. Every sentence of the Dokudo is a blade. There is no room for excuses, no concessions. It's a farewell that feels like a final slash. Have no preferences. Do not cling to life. Envy no one. Desire nothing unnecessary. Do not fear death. This is not a manual for those who seek comfort. It's a code for those who seek power, not power over others, but power over themselves. The power to walk alone, to not wait, to not ask, to not need. Musashi's last letter is not read with the eyes. It's felt with the soul. It's dry like stone, and because of that, pure. It doesn't try to please. It's not poetic, not romantic. It is truth, condensed. Truth written by someone who had already emptied himself of everything, who owed nothing to the world, who no longer had anything to prove to anyone. And that's what makes this letter so cutting. It doesn't ask for your understanding, it simply says, this is how it is. And anyone brave enough to live out each line of the Dokudo will lose much, will end up alone, will be judged, but also will be free. Picture this. A man dying slowly in a cave. No funeral, no ceremony, no drama. Just a brush, a sheet of paper, and 21 sentences that decapitate everything still chaining you today. And why did he write them? Because he knew that even in death, his final act of cutting could serve as a sword for anyone willing to live without being corrupted. He left behind the final weapon, one that doesn't cut the body but kills attachment, fear, need, and internal lies. And because of that, this final letter is worth more than all the battles he ever won. Maybe you're still searching for grand answers, for big speeches, for elaborate advice. But Musashi in death chose the opposite, the cruel simplicity of the essential, because in the end, only what is unbreakable survives. And the unbreakable doesn't need much. It only needs clarity and the courage to cut everything that is not. Most cuts are visible. A breakup, a farewell, a change of path, a silence between two people. But there is one cut no one sees, and it changes everything forever. It's the internal cut. The precise moment when you decide, deep in your soul, that you no longer need anyone. Not out of pride, not out of coldness, but out of clarity, because you realize that your greatest dependency was never physical. It was emotional. It was energetic. It was the belief that your peace depended on someone's presence, on their response, on their affection. And when that tie is severed, You don't become a monster. You become free. And this kind of freedom doesn't make noise. It simply silences everything that used to make you twist and ache inside. Musashi mastered this invisible sword. It was with it that he won battles others didn't even know existed, because the true enemy is not the other person. It's your expectation of them. As long as you need someone to see you, understand you, choose you, love you, you are chained. Even if you're smiling, even if you're surrounded, even if you seem happy, inside there's always a chain tugging, an anxiety suffocating, a feeling that someone is missing. But the day you cut that, the world changes, the voices vanish, the ties dissolve. You walk lighter, straighter, calmer, because finally you've become whole again. This cut is not easy. It doesn't happen in a snap. It comes after sleepless nights, after stacked disappointments, after unacknowledged pain, after silences that were ignored. But one day, you wake up and something breaks, not with drama, with serenity, and you think, enough. Yeah, not like someone giving up, but like someone waking up, and in that moment, without warning, you cut. Not the person, but the unconscious pact of emotional dependence. You may even remain beside that person. You may still stay in touch. But inside, something changed. The hunger passed, the craving dissolved, the need died. Musashi lived like that. He could walk among many, but relied on no one. He could teach, but didn't need disciples. He could love, but never sold himself for affection. And that's why he was impossible to trap, because he had already freed himself from within. He had already made the cut. He had already wielded the invisible blade and severed the most dangerous illusion of all, that we need someone else to be complete. And you, have you wielded this blade, or are you still waiting for a gesture, a reply, a glance? The invisible sword doesn't cut others. It cuts the part of you that begged for emotional crumbs. And when that part falls, you don't become stone. You become a temple, a sacred place, clean and silent, where only those who come in truth may enter, those who come whole, not to complete you, but simply to walk beside you. This is the cut that doesn't bleed, but heals. That doesn't hurt, but frees. That doesn't show, but transforms everything, because after it, no one can dominate you again. After you've cut everything, after you've stopped explaining, after you've silenced guilt, fear, attachment, the need to be loved, a strange moment arrives, a moment with no name, no fireworks, no applause. It's a void, but it's a clean void, a silence, unlike any other, not the silence of forced solitude. It's the silence of someone who no longer needs to fight for space, for recognition, or for presence. It's the silence that comes when you become uncontrollable, because the whole world can scream and you don't move. It can demand and you don't give in. It can cry and you don't return, because now you belong to yourself. Musashi lived in that silence, died in it, and left that silence as a legacy for anyone brave enough to walk to the end of the path. Because when the warrior cuts everything that can be used against him, what remains is something the world doesn't know how to handle, a presence that does not bend, does not respond, and does not serve. And that presence is terrifying, because no one can touch you emotionally anymore. No one can provoke you. No one can pull you into the emotional games that once enslaved you. You've become immune to drama, immune to praise, immune to absence, immune to demands. And this immunity isn't coldness. It's maturity, it's clarity, it's armor. The silence of someone who is free is uncomfortable, because it shows with brutal clarity everything others no longer have access to. It reveals that you no longer need the explanation, or the closure, or the reconciliation. You just need to move forward. And for the manipulator, the controller, the emotionally dependent, that's unbearable, because now you're an unbreakable mirror. You simply reflect. You simply remain, you simply breathe. And that stability is the highest form of power. The world tries to pull you back, but you won't go. Tries to hit you, but you don't bleed. Tries to win you back, but you're already gone, not physically, but internally. You've already left. And that's when you understand. The true end of manipulation is not when you walk away. It's when you no longer care. Because then there's nothing left tying you down. No anger, no unresolved love, no thirst for justice, no desire to be understood. You no longer need to win because you've already won. And the trophy is this silence, this full emptiness, this lightness that needs no witness, this peace that asks no permission. The world can keep trying to provoke you, but now everything passes through you without ever getting in. Musashi reached that place, and he left the path. A path with no ornaments, no shortcuts, no relief, but that ends like this, with the soul in absolute silence, with the sword sheathed, with the presence intact, with a body ready for anything, but a spirit surrendered to nothing. Because the warrior who won every battle is the one who no longer needs to fight. Imagine a man who has given too much, who has explained himself countless times, who has served causes, people, loves, promises. Imagine this man exhausted, in pieces, breathing weariness, sleeping with guilt, waking with anguish. And now, in a thick silence, he realizes no one ever truly saw him. They just used him, demanded from him, bent him until he forgot who he was. And then, right there, he stops. He doesn't shout, doesn't argue. He just stops, sits down, closes his eyes and decides, it's over. The age of concession is over. The cycle of explanation is over. The life of serving everyone but himself is over. This is where Musashi's golden rule becomes flesh, not as an idea, not as a metaphor, but as a scene. Because in that moment, the warrior begins to rebuild himself. First, he rises slowly, like someone relearning how to walk. And he looks around as if seeing everything for the first time, and he realizes the world is the same. But he is not, because now he no longer serves anyone. He's no longer an extension of others' desires, no longer reactive to expectations. He no longer needs to be what others expect, only what he is, only what he desires, only what remains after everything has been cut. The reconstruction begins in the invisible. He declines invitations, leaves messages unanswered. He silences himself, walks alone, not out of rebellion, but out of integrity, because he knows every new step must be taken without the weight of the old ones. So he speaks less, engages less, reacts less, because he understands that peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the absence of dependence. And the less he depends, the stronger he becomes. Now, if someone wants to enter his life, they must come whole, come clean. No demands, no games, no theater, because this new man no longer serves anyone. And the world feels it. It feels the difference. It feels the absence of his old self, the one who said yes out of fear, who pleased out of habit, who yielded out of need. That version died, buried without ceremony. In its place now lives a warrior who smiles little but lives deeply, who speaks little but feels everything, who demands little, but accepts nothing less than truth, because his center is no longer outside, it's within. And for that reason, no one can pull him out of place anymore. He became presence, became stone, became a straight line in a world bent in all directions. You can live this scene right now. Just stop. Just cut, just rise, not like someone screaming, but like someone who finally accepts that he owes nothing to anyone. Because Musashi's golden rule is not a philosophy to debate, it's a blade to wield. And when it slices through the flesh of attachment, fear, and need, what remains is not coldness, it's freedom. The rebuilt man is not less human, he is more whole, and because of that, more dangerous. Because now, he no longer serves anyone, and that's why he can serve his path with truth. Being free hurts, because true freedom doesn't come with celebration, it comes with loss. You don't become free when you gain everything. You become free when you lose what enslaved you, and survive when you lose the affection that manipulated you, the friendship that drained you, the praise that bent you, the attention that domesticated you. You become free through mourning, through cutting, through silence, through endings, and Musashi knew that with brutal clarity. He knew that if he wanted to live with integrity, he had to learn how to lose. And not lose what was bad, but what was comfortable, what was beautiful, what was seductive, but deep down only existed to keep you dependent. If you want to be free, truly free, you will have to look into the eyes of people you love and let them go. Not because you want to, but because you must. Because you realize what you had wasn't love, it was possession, it was control, it was emotional blackmail disguised as care. You'll have to cut ties with those who say, "I understand you," but only if you keep betraying yourself to please them. You'll have to break from those who say, "I'm here for you," but charge interest for it every day. You'll have to accept that not everyone who hugs you wants you to be free, and that will tear you apart, because you'll see that much of what kept you surrounded by people was really just fear of being alone. And the manipulator loves that. They don't bind you with chains. They bind you with compliments, with memories, with glances, with promises that things will get better. But they never do, because you're the one holding it all up. You're the one carrying the weight. You're the one feeding it. You're the one keeping silent. And if you want to stop, it'll hurt. It will seem cruel. It will seem ungrateful. But Musashi would tell you, this is not cruelty. This is liberation. He didn't carry anyone, not because he didn't love, but because he knew that love without freedom is a prison with flowers. And every warrior who wants to walk on their own feet will sooner or later have to accept this truth. Some people stay only because they can use you. And if you cut off that access, they vanish, disappear, accuse you, say you've changed, that you've grown cold. But the truth is, you return to yourself. And that is unbearable for those who only knew how to love you when you were useful. If you want to be free, you'll have to walk light. And to walk light, you'll have to let go. You'll have to disappoint. You'll have to be the villain in the story of those who used you as a side character. You'll have to rise and say, "I choose myself." Even if that leaves you alone for a while. Even if it breaks you silently. Even if it leaves you without answers, because only those who learn to lose everyone who used them gain themselves completely. This is the end of the script, but it might just be the beginning of your real life.